Hello everyone, this is your host Vasif and welcome to the latest episode of the AiVerse. Today here we have with us the best brains that I know. He is one of the position holders of the Institute of Business Administration. He's a Fulbright scholar from the University of Southern California. He is a data scientist, one of the renowned data analytics firms of Pakistan, Love for Data. He is also one of the youngest instructors at the IBA and he is an all-star teacher. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Hassaan Khalid. Mr. Hassaan Khalid, welcome to the AiVerse. How are you doing?
I'm good, Vasif. Thank you. And thank you for that very flattering introduction.
It's okay, sir. Okay, so let's begin. Who is Hassaan Khalid?
I can take that question a number of ways. It's a very broad question, to be very honest. So I can tell you academically, and I can tell you about it personally. I think the personal aspect is a little easier to address. You go to the dictionary, you look up the word nerd, and whatever definition you come up with, you can just paste my picture on there, right? I've always enjoyed academics in general. So to the extent that I enjoy studying everything. When I was applying for my undergrad universities, I applied for engineering, I applied for medical, I applied for IBA, and I had no idea what I wanted to do because I was just like, I just need to be in a classroom environment. And I chose IBA after some admission tests and everything. But overall, I've always just enjoyed being in an academic setting. So yeah, textbook nerd here.
Textbook nerd. Okay, so how did you end up from being a BBA student at the IBA to data analytics, data scientist?
Okay. I think that initial confusion that I had regarding what I want to do in life, that led to it for the most part. So I joined IBA, I was getting a merit scholarship. So I was like, looks like a good place. And the institute is good. The fees is 50% deducted. So everything looks good. Let's just join it. Around 2 years down the lane in a BBA, usually every BBA student goes through that phase where he's like, I'm just repeating everything I've learned. So I just learned this in principles of marketing. Now I'm studying the same concepts again in branding and advertising. And there is a lot of repetition, right? And it's very subjective as well. A lot of the BBA curriculum is subjective. So around, I guess, BBA 4, BBA 5, I get the chance to work at one of the projects with a few faculty members. It was an industry project for one of the leading automobile companies in Pakistan. And they were doing a nationwide survey of their dealerships. And the survey encapsulated aspects of like, let's say, customer relationship management. Is the manager treating you well? Are you happy with the service? Stuff like that. Maybe, I don't even remember, maybe 100, 200 different service shops that they were running. And that was the first time where I noticed that, I can make a lot of decisions based on numbers. And I can maybe come and tell you, your dealership at location XYZ has a manager named A, and that manager is very rude to customers, so your dealership is suffering. And that was something that we had only talked about subjectively in our courses. So I think that was one of my first forays into the field of analytics. Lucky enough to land an internship at the resource group TRG, and I think I've been a very lucky person throughout my life. So I got a project dealing with social media monitoring for one of the largest clients that the company had. And once again, I found myself in a position where I was like, people are saying a lot of stuff, but I can use those reviews, those tweets to go back to the brand and say, this is a problem that you're facing. For example, I mean, one of the brands that company had was instant noodles. And we figured out that you cannot make instant noodles in 2 minutes. You can only make it in 2 minutes if the water is already boiling. So in boiling water, it takes 2 minutes. We actually received a barrage of complaints from customers who used to wake up late for Sehri. And they were like, I tried to make noodles, but it doesn't cook in 2 minutes because there is a time to boiling the water.
Yes.
Right? But we could make those judgments based on data. And I think it just kicked off from there. So TRG offered me a job for the same project after I graduated. And TRG is really an amazing place to start your career. Everybody is really supportive and they're actually interested in your personal development. So around 6-7 months down the lane, they started pushing me and saying, join SatMap. SatMap is now known as Affinity. It's an AI company. So they started pushing me for it, and I was like, I don't know programming. And they said, no issues, we'll teach you. And I made that shift to Affinity. They taught me SQL, they taught me R to some extent. And the main idea was, okay, we know that you're good at analytics, everything else we'll teach you. And they were also the ones who pushed me for a Fulbright. Like the higher education culture in Affinity is one of the best I've ever seen. Everybody is from Harvard, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, what have you, Stanford. And when they pushed me, and I was like, okay, this guy who has been to Imperial thinks that I should also apply. Maybe there is something to it. And he was like, yeah, I'll write your recommendation for you. Take a week off, prepare your GRE and go for the Fulbright. I was like, okay, fine. And I applied for the Fulbright and got into the Fulbright program, went for the Masters in Business Analytics, which was an amazing experience in general. Came back, and the rest, as they say, is history, because I joined Love for Data. That has been growing. I was one of the first members. So we built up a data science team, went up to like 15-20 members, have a lot of projects, came to IBA, started a few courses, and I am where I am today.
Okay, so how would you define data science? Like, what is data science and how is it helping modern day businesses?
Okay, so when you look at data sciences, it's, in my opinion, it's a culmination of a few fields. So we always used to study programming, and we always used to study statistics, and we always used to study business. When you combine those three, you get what you call data sciences. And one of the very first examples that might have kick-started all of this is that example you're taught in BBA, where they say Walmart or some other chain figured out that they should place diapers next to beers, because parents of infants who are coming in to buy diapers, they're already so tired, they genuinely need a drink, right? And I think that was one of the first instances where they were like, we can use our knowledge of statistics and programming, because you're analyzing a lot of store receipts, you're analyzing a lot of data, so you need that programming knowledge and you need that statistics knowledge to bring about a business insight. And since then it has kicked off, where you have people like Martin Lindstrom attaching headsets to people and getting their thermal scans while they're shopping, and God knows what and what not. But that was really the kick-starting point. So it's just statistics, programming, and business. Now, how it has evolved globally and how it has evolved locally is a different problem. Globally, when you talk about it, I think one of the leading factors to the progress of data science globally was infrastructure. In the sense that in Pakistan, most of our economy is informal. You get a tire punctured, you go to the roadside vendor who fixes the tire for you. There's no record of that transaction. There's no record of the transaction that you had at your local Kirana store. There is nothing recorded, because A, it's tax evasion in a way, and B, we just don't have that sort of an infrastructure. The West, however, has had that infrastructure for a long time. Everything is centralized. And that just enables them to capture a lot more data and move towards making decisions analytically. So over there, you will see it now that banks are maybe monitoring each and every single transaction that you're making. And they'll call you up and they'll be like, oh, you just booked a hotel suite in XYZ city. You've never been there. Are you sure it's you? Because we don't see any payments on your card for an airplane ticket either. And they're actually just mapping out all of this, and they're at a position where they can stop any fraudulent transactions. And I'm not even talking about money laundering. I'm just talking about simple fraudulent transactions. Somebody got the details of your card and, they can stop that. Because that infrastructure exists, and that is why they are where they are today. And you'll see it happening in a lot of different places. So from hospitals, one of the very good examples that I teach in my MBA classes as well is there's this hospital called, I believe it's called Intermountain. I can get back to you with the name, but they track everything regarding their doctors. So one of the things that they track is, if you're a doctor and a patient came to you for some help, how often does that patient have to return within the next 2 or 3 weeks? Because that means that you're not curing him properly. You're not assigning maybe the right drugs. And I can compare your performance with other doctors. They're monitoring stuff like, is branded equipment better than generic equipment. So there's a very good case that they have where they found that a branded syringe or some injection which cost maybe $750 performed the same way as a $250 version of it, which was generic. And using that data, using that information, they were able to convince the supplier that, your product is not any better than the generic version. You need to give it to us at $250. And they got their way on it, right? So I think that globally we have moved to a place where data is king and every decision is being made based on data. In Pakistan, maybe we have a long way to go, but that is where data science is evolving that business globally and how data science functions, in my opinion.
So you said that Pakistan is moving towards data science at a very low pace. So what do you think are the major roadblocks that are being faced in Pakistan?
I mentally break this down into three different topics. One of the topics is infrastructure. We do not have the necessary infrastructure. So I was working for this baking goods conglomerate, and that is as much detail as I'll give you on the client name. And they have maybe 20-30 stores. They're planning to open 20-30 more. They want like 100 stores by the end of 2020-2021. And you ask them, how do you record your sales? And they're like, we don't have a centralized system. So once a week, our rider will go out and he will collect all of the receipts from each outlet. He will bring them back and he will enter them manually. And that is how we make a record of our sales. Now, imagine the number of errors that can happen. The rider drops a receipt. Maybe when he is entering it manually, he adds an extra zero. That happens a lot, right? So a lot of errors can come up. So there is that issue of infrastructure, right? And this infrastructure issue is not something that is limited to FMCGs. For example, biometric verification for your bank accounts came out in 2018, right? And it took them a good 2 years to actually implement it, where they said everyone has to come and everybody has to give their fingerprint because we have fake accounts, blah, blah, blah. But Nadra has had your fingerprint since forever. Right? So why did we not merge with them initially? We lacked the infrastructure, right? And that has been one of the leading roadblocks to data science evolution, because when you go to a client and the client says, I do not have data, or the client says, I have data, but it's in a paper format and you need to transcribe it first, or you need to digitize it first, that obviously presents a significant barrier. The second aspect of it is what I call conflicts of interest. Let's go back to that bakery conglomerate example. Now, I know for a fact that bakery conglomerate has a few area managers. And the only job of the area manager is to predict how many pastries are going to sell the day tomorrow. And if I were to build an algorithm, maybe you will retain one of those area managers, but you do not need the other three anymore, right? And those four don't know which three it will be, but you will have to get rid of 3 people because now you are doing the work of those 3 people in an automated fashion. What happens in data science is that the people testing your algorithms are often the same who are going to be impacted by it. So when I go to those clients and I say, I've built a sales forecasting algorithm, can you please test it? And if it is good, please purchase it. They will say, go talk to the area manager because he's the one who's going to validate your work. Now that area manager has a conflict of interest. And that really becomes a huge roadblock. So I do not want anyone to know that in my branch, for example, as a banking manager, in my branch, we are not recording CNICs correctly when people come to open their accounts. I do not want the leadership to know this. So whenever analytics comes in, there's that transparency that comes in with it, right? You know exactly how much value that person is adding. You know exactly what errors that person is making. So people become afraid for their jobs and they're afraid as to how they will provide for their family if they get fired. And that has been a huge roadblock in the way. The third roadblock, I think, is the workforce. Because when we teach, and this was actually told to me by one of my mathematics professors, I think the sign of a good teacher is they say something and it's very trivial to them, but it sort of changes your perspective on a lot of things, right? So one of those teachers, and I guess I can take his name, he won't mind, but he might have forgotten it, but Dr. Junaid Alam, he teaches at IBA. One day he says to me, Hassaan, you know what your problem is? You guys study in boxes. And what he means by I study in boxes, he was like, you have a box for mathematics, you have a box in your brain for statistics, you have a box in your brain for marketing. You do not let those boxes touch each other. So you go to a finance class, you take out that finance box, you cram new information in it, you close that box, it is closed until the next finance lecture or assignment. You do not take that knowledge of finance into your marketing class. You do not try to make use of that knowledge in your finance and your marketing class. And I've actually faced that complaint from students myself. So in my AAMD course, the course that I introduced, it's called Analytical Approach to Marketing Decisions. One of the case studies we do is how do you price a project? And obviously when you price a project which is going to run for a long time, there are monthly payments, so there's discounting involved, there's a little bit of finance involved. Every semester, a couple of students will always complain, why are we studying finance in a marketing class? And I'm like, they are the same topic. It's all business. It's not finance and marketing to me, it's business, right? But that is how we are historically taught. And at any institution, you'll see this. It's not just something that is prevalent in any one institution, it's everywhere. What that does, it creates a workforce that is not ready for the business environment where everything is connected, where you as a marketing individual are responsible for project price planning, and you are going to be questioned on it, but you don't know finance because you thought it is irrelevant, so you are not capable of making that decision. Or you do not know statistics, so you're not capable of building a sales forecasting model or even evaluating it if you get it built from somewhere else, right? So we have individuals who go into the market with very specialized interests and very little broader information which allows them to function cohesively in an organization. And I think that has been a significant roadblock in the path of data sciences, because as a consultant, I cannot go to a business manager and expect him to know what an R square is, even though that is very basic knowledge and he should know it, but I have to explain it to him for 1 hour because those concepts for him are not connected. So I think those three things: infrastructure, conflict of interest, churning out students who are not well versed in the broader business spectrum. I think that is where we need to work on if we want data science to grow at a much more drastic pace.
Absolutely agree with what you said. So I had this question that how do you make sure that the upcoming workforce, as you said, the students, are geared up for this analytics culture that is being created in Pakistan?
I think whenever you have a problem, right, you cannot ever solve a problem by just fixing one thing. So you need to work on 3 or 4 different fronts, and 3 of those fronts are the ones that I just mentioned. So let's talk of infrastructure. That was the first thing I mentioned, right? One of my professors at USC, Professor Saeed Muhasib, he used to say one of the mistakes that we make in analytics is we want to start from scratch. You want to go to a client and you want to tell him, build up an infrastructure worth $1 million, start capturing data, I will come back to you 2 years later to help you out. And at the end of those 2 years, maybe I'll end up saying, oh, you didn't capture the right data. And he was like, you can't sell anything that way. You cannot build anything that way, right? You need to start in the middle. So in Pakistan, for example, it doesn't matter if that person is manually entering data 2 weeks down the line because he collected receipts manually from the stores. You need to take that data and you need to build something on it to show its value, and in parallel you start setting up the infrastructure. Once you show the value of something, people will be more willing to invest in that infrastructure. It's an activity. It's not something that day 0 I say, okay, I want infrastructure to do something, day 1 it is ready. That's not how it works, right? So we need to take infrastructure one step at a time. And we need to understand that initially the returns on any analytics projects are going to be limited because we have limited data, but we need to work with it. And I think that at the back end of it, like Love for Data, for example, is very open about this. We're like, yes, we know you do not have very good data, maybe. Tell us what you have, we will see what we can do. As long as you agree with us on the fact that the results are limited by data, maybe we can work out a long-term partnership where you collect more data and we'll have a very profitable partnership for both of us, right? That is one thing that we need to understand. The other part of it is the culture of companies to begin with, right? So I'll tell you one example. So when I was in Affinity, I had one of the bigger clients and I made a mistake on that client. And that mistake was something that sets us back maybe a month. It costs us quite a bit. And I didn't know I'd made that mistake. Around 2 weeks later, I shoot out an email and I say, the other teams are not working. I've already reported that this issue is happening. Nobody is helping me. What is going on? I want this client to be profitable. And somebody messages back on a personal email, thankfully, thank you to that person. But he's like, Hassaan, I think you've made a mistake. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, my CEO is in that email. My manager is in that email. I am getting fired today.
Yeah.
And the next thing I do is I send out a very heartfelt apology. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. This was my mistake. This is no other team's mistake. So all of this is on me. It's on nobody else. And I don't know what to say. It's just a mistake. And nobody ever came back to me saying, Hassaan, why did you make that mistake? And for me, that just cemented my place in Affinity, where I was like, okay, they know that people make mistakes. It was an honest mistake. So I am not getting reprimanded for it. In fact, I think I got an A+ bonus in that term as well. And for me, that was something, okay, that means that I'm allowed to experiment. I'm allowed to make mistakes. My job is safe because they can see that I'm coming in daily and I'm putting in a lot of hours and I want the company to be successful. So hats off to them, because very, very few managers in Pakistan would actually do something like this. Very few companies in Pakistan where you can make a huge blunder and not get a warning letter, to say the least. Right? We need to bring that culture. And I'll take you back. I said everyone in Affinity was very highly educated, right? I think that is the reason. When you have a highly educated leadership, they understand that this is part of business, right? We need to bring that culture. So we need to go ahead and tell people, you know what, even if analytics initiatives come in, we will find a new role for you. You are not going to be replaced. You are not going to be let go of. You are valuable to the company because when we did not have that technology, you were there for us, right? You have been there. And that is the culture that we need to foster. That we can always find a new role for someone who is good at their job. And that feeling needs to come from the top down, right? It needs to come from the CEO and go throughout the organization. And that is what will end conflict of interest as well. Because when people have job security and they know that, honest mistakes are forgiven and I'm not going to be let go of just because there's an algorithm that can do my job. As long as you have those two things set up, you can fire people for being dishonest. I don't think anybody has an issue with being fired. If I'm opening a fake bank account, yes, I'm being fired and I'm going to jail. And we need to have that accountability. I'm a big proponent of accountability there, right? But in terms of honest mistakes, in terms of being let go of just because we don't have a role for you anymore, we need to foster that culture and we need to bring about that culture. I'll give you another example for this. I'm sorry I'm dragging this a little, but it's important to understand this. When the Abraj group took over KESC, they let go of a lot of employees saying that this is downsizing, right? And the employees that are let go of are the guy who used to climb the pole to fix the wires because now we have a machine which will take us up and it's safer. But whose fault is it that that guy who used to climb the pole doesn't know anything else? It's the company's fault, right? They did not train that employee. And that is where conflict of interest comes in. Now, had they said maybe 20 years ago that, we can see technology coming in, which means that your skills are going to be wasted someday. So we need to do something about it so you are safe. Had the company taken that people-centered approach, such a large downsizing might not be needed. Right? And we see examples of this on a daily basis. We need companies to realize that people are not just assets or resources, they're people, they have families at home. We need to train them for new things so that there's no conflict of interest. And once the conflict of interest goes away, I think you will see that we will pick up on the progress in data science a lot faster.
Absolutely. I had this question that was knocking on my door. I believe that, as you said in the previous example, that those electricians and those pole guys, their jobs were replaced because of machines, right? So that job is very repetitive, that job is very mundane. Anyone can do it, a machine can do it. And also people with jobs of predicting these sales are being replaced by simple sales forecasting algorithms, right? So I had this intriguing question that it's the year 2050 and you have seen how rapid progress is being made in the fields of data science as well as AI and machine learning. So it's the year 2050. What do you see around yourself?
Okay. So I'll take that question first, and then we need to go back to the previous one because we have one element missing, right? But
okay.
Let's address this first. There are two elements to this. One element is where do you see the jobs, and the second element is where do you see data sciences. Let's talk about the jobs first. There used to be a time when we didn't have tractors, right? And we didn't have equipment to plow the field. So you needed a lot more farmers. Then equipment came in. Now you need fewer farmers. What did the other people do? They found new roles. They found new jobs, right? This has been human history. Humans have evolved, right? We used to have coal-powered trains. So there used to be a guy, and you've seen that in Bugs Bunny cartoons. There's a guy who has a shovel and he's putting the coal in the fire so that the steam-powered locomotive keeps running. What is that guy doing today? He has a new job. We do not need to be afraid of progress in the sense that I don't know what I will be doing tomorrow, because something new will come up. And that new thing might actually come up in a completely different field than you're expecting. So I see a huge growth in entertainment. And I see that because once you went into this COVID lockdown, you actually realized the value of entertainment, right? And I will be the first to say that it was a huge lesson for me as well, because I have always overlooked the arts. And a lot of people will tell you this, that talking to Hassaan Khalid about arts was like banging your head on the wall. He was like, why should I pay so much to someone just to make a movie?
Okay.
Right? But we saw that it's an important aspect of life, right? So maybe these people whose jobs are replaced will go on to be TikTok stars, or will go on to some other forum. Maybe some will start writing books, but humanity will progress and there will always be jobs because it is in the human nature to work. That is my personal opinion on this, and I think that history supports me rather than anyone else in this, because we have always made progress. There used to be thousands of people working in an industry. Now maybe with machines, the automobile is assembled mostly automatically. So you're not asking me where did those people go, are you? But then you're very concerned about those 3 sales managers. They will find new jobs. We need to facilitate them in finding new jobs. And so that brings us to the question that, okay, then where is the growth happening, right? And I see growth happening in 4 or 5 different fields. And I'll be honest, this isn't completely original. So I went and read a few articles and I was like, yeah, more or less, this is what I agree with. This is what I don't. So this is what the part that I agree with in those articles. One is entertainment, right? And I don't think most people know this, but Will Smith used to have a team of analysts telling him which movie to act in, which would be more successful, right? Take chess, for example. There was the documentary on Netflix a while ago called Carlsen. It's on Magnus Carlsen. And so Magnus Carlsen is set to face Vishwanath Anand for the chess championship. And they show us that Vishwanath Anand actually has a team of data scientists who help him simulate how Magnus Carlsen plays so that he can prepare against Carlsen, right?
Yes, exactly. I've heard about this as well.
Yeah. So imagine like in a game of chess, you have all of these new jobs being created as well, right? Another example, so you know about Anil Kumble, right? The Indian cricketer.
Yeah.
He's recently launched a company which allows you to put a small sticker on your bat, and that sticker has a chip in it. So it's tracking which shot you played at what velocity, where was the ball pitched. It's tracking everything, and it's digitally transmitting all of that data to your laptop, and you can analyze your gameplay, right? So in terms of entertainment, whether it's movies, whether it's sports, whether it's something like chess, which you might not count as a sport, I love chess, but you see a huge boom, and you see jobs being created in terms of analytics and all of that, right? Another growth that I see is in the medicine industry. The reason being, that's more of a human interest thing. Maybe it's not as much centered on money, but it is in our general interest to have medications available and to have better prognosis available, right? So you do see people investing a lot in cancer research, right? And you see people trying to come up with medication which would help you kill just the cancer cells instead of indiscriminately killing everything. So chemotherapy tends to harm your body, not just the cancer cells, right? So you see a lot of things coming into the field of medicine as well. And recently when COVID happened, there was this student from Karachi, from Pakistan, I'm not sure Karachi, but he said, I've built a model which tries to predict whether you have COVID or not based on your lung scan. I don't know what happened about it, lung x-rays. I don't know what happened about it, but you see people making a lot of investment and a lot of effort into this field, right? Because the idea is that we need better healthcare. We need a better human living condition, to say the least, right? So that is one field where I see an expansion as well. Another field where I could see an expansion in terms of how do I see us in 2050 is cybersecurity. So especially in terms of finance, you do see people coming up with algorithms to make your payments not only more protected, but to also detect, let's say, money laundering, to detect fraudulent behavior, stuff like that. You talk about blockchain, so I'm not an expert in blockchain, maybe you guys are more than me, but you do see these changes coming in where everything is now becoming digitized. So I just take out my Apple Pay and I pay on the spot. Or you see, if you've heard the concept of Amazon Go, you just go into a shop, you pick up your groceries, you walk out, the bill is deducted automatically. They're detecting what you picked up, what you kept back. And I see a huge growth in that sector as well, where you want to just make human lives more comfortable through the use of A, cybersecurity, B, making things that are mundane automated. So like maybe cashier jobs, or you had to stand in line at the cashier, now you can just walk out. So things that humans generally don't like doing manually, I see a lot of growth in that happening in an automated fashion. And the last part, I think, is transportation. Because you see a lot of work being done on self-driving vehicles, autonomous vehicles. You see a lot of work being done on whether we should have electric cars or the regular cars. There's a lot of growth in that sector, right? So in essence, I mean, if you talk to me about 2050, all I see is maybe a better living experience in terms of technology. So technology being more pervasive into every element of our lives, every aspect of our lives. Yeah, if global warming doesn't kill you first. So caveat, right? But other than that, I mean, I see things going well. The one thing that, and that sort of brings me back to what we were discussing earlier, the one thing that we need is a workforce that is prepared for this. And to be prepared for this, we need to ensure that we teach differently. So I'll give you an example. I failed geography. The only subject I've ever failed in my life is grade 9 geography, where I was given 4 grace marks so that I could progress to the next class, because I just hate geography. I literally do not care if there are mountains in the north. When I go to the north, I will check the mountains for myself, right? That is my mindset. But you come to me and you teach me geography in the sense of, Parmesan cheese can only be made in this region of Italy because it has the weather conditions that are needed for it and the altitude and this and that. Now that makes geography interesting, right? Because of the fact that it's more linked to our experiences. It's not just random rote learning. We need to make things interesting. We need to connect subjects to each other. So we need to come into a stats class and we need to be able to say, today I'm going to teach you about central limit theorems, and this is how they are applicable to your life. And that is the very crucial aspect of education that we have been missing. And that change is not going to come easily, because you need to train faculty. And in terms of training faculty, I mean, the usual conception is that the faculty knows whatever they're talking about. I walk into my first class and the first disclaimer I give is, I have a slightly better idea of what I'm talking about than you do, but I'm in no way infallible. Everything I say, you have the right to question it, and if I cannot give you an appropriate response, then you have the right to question it forever, right? We need to bring that mindset change in our faculty members. We need to send them to workshops, teach them new things, sort of inculcate in them that habit that your learning should never stop. The problem is we get a PhD and our learning stops. We need to make sure our learning never stops. We need to make sure that our faculty is capable of linking subjects together. So a marketing faculty is not a purely marketing faculty. He or she needs to draw from experiences in statistics and accounting and finance and HR. Sales management is a marketing topic where it is heavily HR related, right? How do you motivate salespeople? What do you look for in a salesman, right? So all of that comes in. We need to motivate the faculty in the right way, and we need to motivate our students in the right way. Right now, the trend of education in Pakistan is terrible, right? And why it's terrible is, you need to get 9 A's. If you don't get 9 A's, you've basically lost all respect that I had for you, right? You need a 3.5 GPA, you need this, you need that. That's the wrong way of studying. And if you go to the US, for example, when I was in the US in the master's domain, there was no attendance in most of my classes, but all of the students were always there. And right now, the students of Pakistan, they say we don't want attendance, but then they also do not want to show up to class. So I've seen that a lot. There's a lack of intrinsic drive for education. There's a lack of intrinsic drive towards academia. We don't feel excited about learning new things. We go into a class thinking, okay, 28 sessions, okay, 27 left, 26 left. Oh no, I have a quiz. Oh no, I have an assignment. We're not excited by the prospect of education. So we need to inculcate that in our students, and we need to inculcate that sense of ever learning in our faculty. That is how we'll be ready for it. So hopefully the 2050 I see is with a very driven, educated workforce of Pakistan, and with generally a better human experience than what we have today, with growths in probably entertainment and medicine and financial security and all of those fields.
That was very insightful and amazing. So if you had to choose between a top-notch engineer or massive amounts of data, what would you choose?
I'm going to throw this one back at you. What would you choose, a chef or top ingredients?
I would say, do I have to cook it or someone else has to cook it? Because for example, if I choose a chef, then I know if I give him normal beef or Wagyu beef, whatever he will present me with is going to taste amazing. But if I choose the perfect ingredients, I do not think I will properly do justice to those ingredients if I cook it myself. So yes, I'll go with the chef.
Yes, I agree with that judgment. So I mean, I do cook and I like cooking, but you give my wife 3-day leftovers and she makes a meal out of it.
Yeah.
You give me 3-day leftovers, there are still 3-day leftovers for me, and they're probably going to the poor man on the street because I'm like, I can just buy something new, right? But even if I were to utilize them, I can tell you right now, there is no way on this earth that I'm going to do as good a job as she is. Right? She is really good at it. So if you were to ask me regarding data versus having a good data scientist on board, my answer is the same. I would always go for a top-notch data scientist, because what happens is that you give a data scientist mediocre data, he will still come up with something. You take a bad data scientist and you give him everything top-notch, perfect data, he's still not going to come back to you with very good results. And that happens a lot. So we have a lot of examples of data scientists who have been hired by companies, but they do not have the right business sense. They do not have everything. They were given all of the data and they failed. And that's just it. So for me, it's always going to be resources before data. Get me good analysts, and I'm sure they will whip up something out of 3-day leftovers. Don't just give me data.
Okay, sir. One last thing that I want your opinion on is, how is China so ahead in this race of becoming an AI superpower? That's
an interesting question, and I will caveat this that I can only give you my opinion on it, right? But look at how they handled COVID. And you see that a lot of it has to do with those same 3 factors that I keep coming back to. So China had the infrastructure. China says that you cannot leave your house more than once every 3 days. And How do they enforce that? They actually have face scanning monitors on every building, on every apartment exits, and you need to scan your face for the door to open, and that door will not open again for you for the next 3 days, right? So that infrastructure, because China has been working on it for a long time, I think they've had the huge advantage of everything being located there, the cheap labor. So Apple goes there, everybody goes there, they have that. So they've built up that culture that, okay, you know what, we need infrastructure because technology is how we are going to make our money in the future. So they've been working on it, right? And the second part of it comes down to the conflict of interest. I can say this, like it or not, but the totalitarian structure in a way, or the intense monitoring that has already been happening in China, right? So there was this news at one point that they're going to start giving you personal credit scores rather than financial credit scores, and doing good things will increase that score, doing bad things will decrease that score.
You'll get better internet speeds, and your fast travel to Europe will also be affected with that score. Yes.
And I personally thought, you know what, that's a good idea. I'll be honest, and if I could, I would bring that concept and implement it on the arranged marriage market of Pakistan, and I think I would make a lot of people very happy with that.
Yes.
Because you get into marriages and it destroys your entire life, and I mean, we actually need something like that. But that's beyond the point. But at least in that structure, everybody was coordinated towards stopping the coronavirus from spreading too much. Everybody was on that same page, right? Because the leadership was on that same page and everyone is being monitored. And they do tend to be a little patriotic as well. So all of that was coming in. Their culture was helping them, because if a superior has told you stay indoors, there's no way you're going outdoors, right? There is that culture. So all of that was working for them. There was no conflict of interest when handling the pandemic, right? And in a lot of things, there has been no conflict of interest. So you will see that when the US says that we will ban Huawei, people say we will not buy Apple. And everybody does that because it's flowing top down. So at least as a nation, they are driven towards the same goal. And I can say the same for the US. So the US, even though it looks very marginalized at the moment, you will see that whenever they have leaders, they tend to work without a conflict of interest for the betterment of the country, right? We unfortunately have not been that fortunate in the past. And we have had people come into power who have utilized that power for their personal gains. I think the whole subcontinent, not just Pakistan, but even India, Bangladesh, we have been plagued by this. And that's an opinion. That's not a political statement I'm making. That's just an opinion that I hold. But there was no conflict of interest in China, and there hasn't been for quite some time in this regard. At least there is conflict of interest in the regard of, let's say, social security. There is a conflict of interest in regard of freedom of information, freedom of speech. Yes, that exists, but they are committed towards driving the country forward in a certain way, and they have the trained resources to do it. So in China, the education system is significantly different from what you have in Pakistan. You don't have books from the 1950s teaching the Carnot engine cycle to you when it is no longer relevant or applicable, right? And that in itself has put them in a position where they are way ahead of everyone else. But I'll be honest with you, we take China as an example because maybe it's closer to us and we hear a lot about it. South Korea was doing a tremendous job at controlling the pandemic, and they had the same reason. They had the infrastructure, their people were motivated towards the same cause, they had educated people to go out and get the job done. And you can find significant examples of all of this. You can find examples in China, South Korea, Japan, for example, has implemented TQM, total quality management, the Six Sigma concept. All of this originates from Japan, right? And they have been driven towards that culture for so long. Since the end of the Second World War, they've been like, okay, we want to develop as a nation. And it's just all of those three factors coming into play and just driving countries forward. And that is why China is where it is. Yes, China has the advantage of the currency exchange rates and having cheap labor because they have so many people. That does work into their favor. But come to think of it, we have a very huge population. We are nowhere close to that. So I think it's one of the contributing factors. But the three things that I state repeatedly tend to have more to do with all of this. But again, I will caveat all of this at the end saying that because it's political as well, it's about international relations as well, which is not my field. It's about economics, which is not my field. So this is an opinion that I hold, and this is open for debate and discussion as well.
Yes, I agree. The fact that you stated that this totalitarian culture that they have in China. So, don't you think my last question that I've been extending now is that don't you think that is a breach of privacy? Like, if this kind of system is implemented in Pakistan, how will the people react?
One thing I will say is a lot of it is already implemented and you haven't reacted. How many times has it happened that you Google something and it shows up on your Facebook ad the very next minute? I mean, there is no real privacy anymore in this world, right? And to have an illusion of privacy is just, I mean, it's just an illusion for you, right? And we saw what Cambridge Analytica could do with some data, right? But I personally think that privacy is not an issue as long as the data is used in the right way. So Cambridge Analytica maybe did something wrong by maybe manipulating voters to vote in a certain way. But so for I had my wife's birthday recently and I went and I ordered something online. I put it in the cart and then I realized, oh wait, it's too expensive. The very next day I get a coupon in my email saying, oh, we are giving you 20% off because you came to the shopping cart and then you left and it looks like you need the help. So take it. And I took that discount and I got the gift and I was happy. It depends on how you use that data. So everything historically, all technological advances historically have been linked to how people use it. So you can use technology to build a nuclear bomb or you can use technology to build a laptop. That is up to you. So I think privacy is not such a major concern as long as you use that data for the benefit of everyone. So if you were to ask me today whether China did the right thing or the wrong thing in terms of the coronavirus, I would say they did absolutely the correct thing. Do I think they are right or wrong in banning Google from portraying everything openly? No, I think they're wrong. It's a matter of how you use that power. Not a matter of whether you have that power or not, because we need to make peace with the fact that the governments do have that power.
I remember this, as you mentioned, Cambridge Analytica. So I read about it in a book that I've been reading, and how they actually, what's it called? They rigged the elections with the Trump winning and stuff. So do you think that we can do this kind of stuff with our politicians as well? Like if we do something, we implement these analytics in Pakistan. Do you think that people will, be swayed into voting for that particular person?
Okay. So I think a couple of things might actually hinder you in Pakistan. Let me begin by saying I'm not entirely sure of what Cambridge Analytica actually did, right? Because I tend to take more interest in local politics than international politics. But beyond that, I think there are a number of things that you might face which would create an issue. For example, infrastructure would become an issue. So you are not capturing data at the level that is being captured in other countries. That is one. Another issue that comes up is that a lot of our voting happens based on where you live or what your feudal landlord says that, go and vote for XYZ party, so you have to go and vote for that party. So I think that you would face hindrances, but the people who are privy to consumption of social media or of all of those things, there's a possibility that you could sway them. But just remember, they weren't swaying every individual. Okay, they were swaying the people who they knew were doubtful. So if you have people who have the power to decide who they want to vote for, A, that is a question here, and B, if you have the power to determine who is actually undecided, then there is a very high likelihood that just by showing them the information that you want to show them, you could sway them. Would it be a good use of that technology? Again, no. I think that you need to show both sides of the coin. You need to do that. But yeah, if you can get that subset of the population, you could probably sway their election decisions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hassaan Khalid, for being with us and dropping those knowledge bombs. And I wish you the very best of luck with your future endeavors.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.